Your last film, We Are Legion, was about Anonymous, and I'm wondering how you got into that subject, and then how that kind of, if it in fact did, kind of move into this subject.
It did, sort of. I mean, Anonymous is such a bizarre, interesting, kind of robust, outrageous non-group that it struck me as something entirely new in terms of protest groups. So I was really fascinated by them, and it did sort of lead into this because I first became aware of Aaron's story. I knew who Aaron was, but I was. He really came on my radar the day he was arrested, which was really the beginning of this 2-year legal nightmare for him. And I was paying attention to his story, mostly because I was looking at other hacker stories, particularly people who had run afoul of the law in some way.
And he was a particularly eloquent person, so as a filmmaker, he must have been very appealing.
Yeah, although I didn't think about making a film about him. And what really struck me is that during that period of time, that 2 years, almost nobody was following his story, at least in comparison to all the other kind of more notorious hackers that you kind of hear about. There's quite a few personalities that make the news. He was absolutely not one of them. So I often wondered.
Because he didn't do anything that was so blatantly illegal that it was a sensational story? I
actually think it was later in making the film, I kind of learned that he was afraid of angering the prosecutor. Mm-hmm. So that made him not want to talk to his friends about it. Right, because he thought that the prosecutor might give him that might open a vulnerability to the prosecutor to bring his friends into the grand jury testimony of some sort, so he just didn't want to expose them to it. So he was actively trying not to talk to people around him.
Which kind of answers my next question, which was he did such an extraordinary job rallying people to fight SOPA.
Yeah.
You think he could have done the same thing to have people stand up for him?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a natural thing. I mean, he was so skilled at these kind of broad kind of
political action,
grassroots movements that you can easily imagine him raising lots of money for his defense and getting lots of public support for it. But it was really the same thing at work. There was the press release that his group, Demand Progress, put out a short press release about his case that just explained what it was. And the prosecutor at the time, according to the MIT report, which came way later, called that press release a wild internet campaign. And I mean, having just made a film about Anonymous, you can imagine, like, I've seen some wild internet campaigns, and that was not one of them.
Yeah.
And so clearly, any time he tried to do something in his own defense, the effort against him was intensified. And that increased his own isolation late in his life, which of course is really a difficult thing if you're going through something.